morning. Hope comes in many forms, in many ways. The stories of hope abound. If you Google stories of hope, you'll come up with hundreds, thousands, maybe millions. Stories of hope, large and small. Stories of small glimmers of hope that change a little situation through to huge dramatic transformations in people, in communities, in the world. Stories of hope. Hope is that intangible thing that is in us, that thing that changes our perspective, our way of seeing, our way of engaging life or the world or the desperation we feel. Hope. There's a story of a soldier who returned from war. His leg had been blown up and he was patched together by the field doctors and sent back to hospitals in the States for treatment. The doctors took him straight into surgery and did all they could, but his leg couldn't be saved and it was amputated. He came out of the surgery well and the rest of him was healthy, and the wound healed well, and they provided him with an artificial leg. All was good with him in his body, but not in his mind. A deep depression had fallen over him, and he just lay on his bed listless, unmotivated, unable to do anything. The doctors and nurses tended him and cared for him, but nothing changed. The young man was depressed and helpless. The doctors brought in other people, counsellors and whoever they could find, offered medications. Nothing changed. They showed him how to put his leg on, they got him up and helped him to walk. He'd take a few steps and fall back listless into bed. In the end, the doctor thought maybe some time at home amongst a loving family who cared for him would change his outlook. So they sent him home, but it was even worse because at home his family loved him so much, was so upset and concerned for him that they pandered him day and night. 24 hours a day there was someone to look after him, who fed him, who bathed him, who dressed him, and the young man did nothing. He just lay on his bed or on the lounge doing nothing. If anything, it was worse. And so the doctor brought him back into the hospital to see if he could snap him out of this depression. But again, nothing he tried, nothing he or the nurses or other doctors tried could do anything. In the end, in complete frustration and despair, he walked into the soldier's room and he laid out the leg, the artificial leg on the bed, and said, "Son, you know how to use this. We've shown you. Son, look, I've dealt with young men and women like you who have lost arms and legs, even eyes, and have gone on to live happy, healthy lives. You've got to help yourself. You've got to do something for yourself. We can't do it for you." Nothing he said seemed to cut through. The guy just lay there as if the words were floating over his head. In the end, totally exasperated, the doctor said, "Son, if you can't help yourself, if you won't help yourself, then let God help you," and stormed out of the room. For a while, nothing happened. The soldier just lay back as if the words had disappeared into the ether. But all the while, something was happening in his mind. And a few days later, the doctor looked out his window at the hospital and he saw this young man being led around the hospital grounds by his girlfriend in a wheelchair. He was smiling and laughing and talking and pointing things out. He'd never done that before in the doctor's midst. He then saw the young man walking around in the hospital with its artificial leg, smiling and talking to people. The doctor was overwhelmed with joy. And they quickly got things together and discharged the young man. He was well and right to go home, and made an appointment for a follow-up checkup. And when the young man sat in the doctor's office a few weeks later, he'd had a full checkup, everything was fine. The doctor said, "You know, son, I was really worried about you. We all were. We didn't know what to do. We tried everything. Nothing seemed to work. But then you came good, and it's given me great joy. You won't believe what joy I have seeing you so well." Now, are there any more, do you need any prescriptions, any more medicines? Is there anything I need to give you? And the young man said, no, doc. The medicine you gave me last time was all I needed. That's fine. And the doctor checked his files and said, hey, what medicine did I give you? And he said, don't you remember, doc? When you came into my room that day, exasperated and frustrated, you gave me that talk. And in the end you said, son, help yourself. But if you can't do it or won't do it, then let God help you. And you stormed out. I don't know what it was, but it kept going around in my mind, and I realised I couldn't help myself. There was something stopping me. I was blocked. And I thought, well, I'll let God. And I did. And gradually things changed. The world looked different. And I started to believe that all could be okay. So thanks. Thanks, Doc. I'll be seeing you. Not all stories of hope have the religious language or words in it. Not all name God or Spirit. But somewhere in them there is this spirit, this mysterious spirit that is love, that is hope, that is mystery, that changes our perspective, who we are and how we see the world, and helps us to live into a different way. Some glimpse of something that stirs us and changes us and allows us to live. That very light glimmer of light at the end of a very, very dark tunnel that draws us on. Hope is this thing that allows us to keep going. For when hope is finally distinguished, there is nothing much left and we can't live. And this week, our story comes from Mark's story of Jesus. We begin a new year in the life of the church, and the season of Advent begins, a season that leads us into Christmas. And a strange story begins. It's a story that comes towards the end of Mark's story of Jesus, in again that last week before his death. And it's sometimes called a mini-apocalypse, a revelation, a story that breaks in. And it's in the context of chaos, of a mixture of words from the ancient writers of the Jewish faith, Isaiah, and of Jesus' words, and I guess of the experience of Mark's times. Mark is writing either just at the end or just after the Jewish-Roman war, the uprising in Jerusalem of the Jewish zealots against Rome that was finally extinguished when the Roman armies came in number, and there was a bloody battle in the temple, the great temple of Jerusalem. The massive temple was destroyed, burned and destroyed. And you can imagine Jerusalem in fire, that the sky growing dark and black with the smoke, the disk of the sun going dark, bright, deep red, and the moon disappearing at night. And Mark's words are like this. There'll be signs in the heavens above and on the earth below. The sun and the moon will grow dark. He's talking about looking at the world, into the world as it is, of seeing the signs of the times, what's there, of recognising in the experiences of life and what's happening, what reality really is about, of looking into the world and not being distracted or deluded by fake news or the distractions of media or social media or other things, but seeing what's happening and recognising another way. In this story, he speaks of the human one who comes, the Son of Man or the human one, drawing again on that vision of Daniel 150, 200 years earlier, in the time of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the great Seleucid leader who ravaged other nations and particularly Israel. And he wrote this story based centuries before in the time of the exile under the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. But those who had the code, who had the language, understood it was in their times, the time of Daniel, that they were being persecuted And he has this vision of these creatures, these beasts that come out of the ocean, out of the primordial chaos, the seas, the place of danger and threat. And the beasts, one after the other, come and they threaten life and humans. And then they're vanquished. And then this human one comes to bring in a new eon, a new era, a new epoch. One that is different, teaching us how to be more human, more truly, deeply human, living into the way that God has created for us, to care for each other, to love each other. And so Mark is inviting us to look into our world and our lives and to see through them, to see through the violence that penetrates and perpetuates throughout the world. There's this cycle and spiral of violence where one throws a bomb and another throws it back, and the crises and conflicts we're seeing all around us in our world. Or to see in our world the warming of the globe, the signs of climate change, and our desperate need to change the way we live. Of looking into the world and seeing and hearing the cries of the poor and impoverished and hungry, those who thirst for water and hunger for food. And to see the stockpiling of resources in the hands of the few, individuals and nations. Stockpiling resources when there's not enough for the rest of the world. Sharing would save people's lives. Of looking into the world and seeing the impoverishment of people who are excluded, people who are denied health, who are denied access to opportunity, people whose abilities and capacities are different, people who live with mental health issues and depression and other things, people who are despairing, people who are refugees and asylum seekers and seeking a safe place for them and their families. To look into our world and see that there's a different way of being, that violence and stockpiling and excluding are not working, and they're creating more problems. That there's another vision for the world that the human one brings in, this Christ figure who brings in this way of love and peace and justice and inclusion, and invites us to live together into it. And knowing that when we live together, when we share and we learn to love each other and love our neighbour and love the one who is different and include them and offer forgiveness where it's sought and needed, when we live in a way that shares and includes and draws on the best of each person, the world can be a different place. A world that's safe for people, for all the creatures of the earth and for the earth itself. And this is the vision that we're invited into. And particularly as we are drawn into Christmas, Mark says, keep awake, keep alert. Read the signs in the world around you of what's happening, but also keep alert for the inbreaking of Christ, of God, of Spirit, of this reign of God, of this different way, of this way of love, this reign of love. Look for it breaking in the beauty and the wonder that you see around you, in acts of love and compassion and kindness, in inclusion and welcome, in love. Look for the breaking in of God, of Christ, of Spirit, because that's what Christmas is all about. And we're invited into this path, this way of love.